Hello all. I would like to introduce us here in order to contribute to the debate about multilingualism and the digital world. We are three Brazilian social psychologists engaged with the critical issue, searching for dialogue between popular and academic knowledge. I am Raquel Guzzo, professor at Pontifical Catholic University of Campinas, working in a community and school context. Here is Simone Nogueira, is a postdoctoral research fellowship working with the affirmative action policies and the contribution of African studies in the Brazilian reality in this group. Both of us producing inside the research group named Psychosocial Evaluation and Intervention, Prevention, Community and Liberation at Psychology Master and Doctor Program at the UCAMP, at University, Catholic University of Campinas. Marcelo Calegare is visiting professor at Federal University of Amazonas in Psychology Graduate Program and he's working with the traditional Amazon River population. What brings us together in this commitment with a liberation horizon, especially for psychology, science, and professional practice, is the goal that leads us to deal with the decolonization process inside the knowledge productions, academic productions. The historical context which justifies our work is colonization of American continent. This history of American continent, including the different economical and political positions from north to south, and the tensions, conflicts, and consequences that existed to the present day, forget psychology and left its marks, especially in professional practices. A brief characterization of America's North, Central, and South, particularly in relation to economic and social indicators, shows that despite this continent has been colonized by Europeans, the process left different consequences to each one of the three parts of it. So, North also reproduced colonization in Central and South America, especially in knowledge and psychology knowledge. So, North American psychology remains as a dominant knowledge in this process of colonization to the Central and South America. The development of critical psychology in the Americas has thus been constituted as a movement for social change, which aims the empowerment of individuals and groups and increased social and political participation in different community spaces. Difficulties exist and are related mainly to the constructing another ethical and political project for decolonizing psychology. So critical psychology in the American continent, albeit on a tortuous and challenging way, has thus been constituted as an important movement for social change, which aims to end oppression, which has impact to the poorest, excluded and exploited people. In this way, critical psychosocial practices have approached the kinds of psychology used in other neighboring professions concerned with the dynamics of communities and social situations. However, major difficulties are still faced by those who wish to construct another project for psychology which accounts for resistance to hegemonic science and professional liberation practices, especially among those involved in training new professionals and ensuring workspaces that are simply reproducing the conservative mode of mainstream colonial psychology. In order to decolonize psychology, it's necessary breaking with the dominant characteristics of the psychological science and do the professional practice. In a process, associate with the highlight of the social and political participation as a key category for the development of transformative actions. It breaks, therefore, with psychological intervention founded in health problems, individual and therapeutic mode. This scenario where this work takes place is the everyday life of people in schools and communities here in Campinas, Brazil. This main question is related to the role of psychology, to the role psychologists can take in the process of participation at the educational setting, contributing to the liberation also at community social inequality, forms of oppression, and violence identified under the subordination of living condition and domination. The running project aims to identify and analyze forms of social political participation of different segments of the population, involving communities, social movements, and school in situations of everyday life. Now you can talk about your main contribution.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Simone Nogueira. It's important to say that I'm a capoeirista. I practice capoeira. It's a kind of Afro-Brazilian martial art, and it's also an Afro-Brazilian culture. So it's from this position that I developed my research in master degree, doctoral degree, and also now in postdoctoral fellow that I'm doing here in the research group with Dr. Raquel Guzzo. So also, my research is informed by traditional Afro-Brazilian history and culture, and my experience there as a white person in Brazil, and also it's the context of this research is the affirmative action policies that are running in Brazil since 2003, especially those policies in the education. So I can identify some of them. The first affirmative action that was approved in Brazil looking for Afro-Brazilian population was in 2003 and was a law that that says it's mandatory to all schools in Brazil to teach ethnic racial relations and Afro-Brazilian history and culture. So this was the first law made in attention to Afro-Brazilian people in Brazil after abolition process. The second law that I want to highlight is ProUni. It's called University for All, and it's financial to student financial in private universities. This was in 2004. In 2008, the Education Ministry approved the teaching of indigenous history and culture. And in 2012 was approved the the reserve of the student reserve. It's a reservation of places in public universities for Afro-Brazilian, lower class population and indigenous people. In this context, it's important to discuss how knowledge production is informed by Eurocentric perspective of the world and also a racist perspective. What I'm doing here in Pontifícia Catholic University right now is to discuss the necessity that we have to decolonize psychology from this Eurocentric, racist, and white-centric perspective, and also to highlight the necessity to recognize and produce knowledge about other worldviews or other perspectives, especially from those majority of the population. Here in Brazil, more than 50% of the population are African descent. So we need a psychology that pay attention on this particularity. Also, we have indigenous people and other perspectives that we need to guarantee in our work in human science, right? So we need to produce new epistemologies, né? And these new epistemologies can be informed by ancestral cultural grounds, like what I do related with Afro-Brazilian cultural practices is to highlight a African epistemology made by knowledge that came from since Egypt, Black Africa, from west of the continent, and also diasporic knowledge, like in Brazil. And I would like to share with you the principal ideas of my postdoctoral research that is related with all this context. This postdoctoral project seeks to develop systematic and in-depth research on African critical thought in psychology and how it contributes to the decolonization project of this science and the affirmative action policies in Brazil context. It will be a qualitative literature research that will identify, analyze, and systematize knowledge in order to implement public policies that may impact and build a new project of nation and society. The work will investigate references such as critical African studies in psychology, colonization and decolonization of knowledge, especially those from Latin American and African perspective, liberation thought, self-epistemologies, Afro-Brazilian population and culture. This proposal aims to develop research extension project, and teaching activities, as well as the establishment of an international cooperation network with Portuguese-speaking African countries and Latin American countries over the period of 2 years. So the idea is to appropriate more about African studies from Caribbean, United States, and Africa, to analyze Afro-Brazilian reality and also articulate this knowledge with other countries in Africa, especially those that are Portuguese speaking, because also we know already that also in Africa there is just a few psychologists using an African perspective of psychology. Most of them are still using a European, Eurocentric, and also racist perspective of psychology. This also happens in Brazil and Latin America. So we are doing integration. We are trying to do an exchange with those people that are making efforts to work with Liberation Horizon, and also bringing others' worldviews to the debate in academic knowledge production. So that's it. And the third person that will speak will be Marcelo Calegare from Amazon Perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.